Please don't end up like this old man. He's a disgrace to the company. Among the 77 new hires, my manager, Kyle, directed this comment at me. I understand. I'll withdraw from the speech. Good. I'll handle the speech. You stay out of the way. I left the induction ceremony. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing before the alarm. It was the president, Mr. Howard, calling. When I called back, he urgently asked me to come to the office. Wondering what was going on, I headed to the president's office and found Mr. Howard, the executive vice president Timothy, and Kyle there. Kyle was staring at a newspaper, visibly shaking. Sorry to bother you so early. Sean, did you see any news online or in the papers last night or this morning? When I said I hadn't, Mr. Howard handed me the local newspaper Kyle was reading. Instantly, a very noticeable photo and headline caught my eye. My name is Sean. I work at a new kind of advertising agency that uses social media for PR. I joined this company when I was 41. I've been able to do the work I've always wanted, and before I knew it, 6 months had passed. My direct supervisor, Kyle, constantly makes snide remarks like your methods are outdated and that won't resonate with anyone. But I didn't have time to care about that and worked tirelessly. Next month, I was given a significant task, a small speech at the orientation. Apparently, I was recommended by Mr. Howard and Timothy for being someone who joined early and excelled. They wanted me to convey that regardless of age, it's possible to take on new challenges using past experiences and skills. The day of the orientation arrived. The event proceeded smoothly in a hotel banquet hall. The orientation, starting at 4 p.m., included not just new hires but also Mr. Howard, Timothy, and other executives. Being there as a regular employee felt rather awkward. I was told I could skip the dinner following the orientation and go straight home if I wanted. The sight of 77 new hires was quite impressive. Kyle was the master of ceremonies. He is apparently related to Mr. Howard. Despite being in his early 30s, he boasts about his position as a manager and often makes sarcastic comments to me. He said things like, "Mid-career hires don't get promoted much," or "You probably look down on me because I'm younger." That's ridiculous. Age doesn't matter. It's only natural that those with skills rise to higher positions, and it's fair that I, as a mid-career hire, am in a lower position than him. When I said that, Kyle smiled contentedly. It's not that I don't feel irritated. But my years of experience have taught me that it's best to keep a moderate distance from such bosses. Maintaining a non-confrontational distance is important. Kyle's MC was very smooth. After the president's address and company explanations, it was time for my speech as the voice of a senior employee. At that moment, Mr. Howard and Timothy were whispered to by other employees and left. Apparently, they had tight schedules. Good luck. Don't be too nervous. Just talk about what you've learned, Sean. As they left, both Mr. Howard and Timothy encouraged me. Their words of encouragement were very uplifting, but I felt my heart rate rising even more. My hands were sweating with nerves. Next, we'd like to hear from a mid-career old man who joined a bit earlier than you all. The room buzzed with murmurs. What did he just say? Old man? Did I mishear that? But Kyle's eyes were on me. His expression was a smug grin that seemed to say, "I'm going to humiliate you in front of everyone." Judging by that look, he definitely meant it for me. Hey, you heard me, old man. At least you should respond. He continued in a disdainful tone. Yes. Sorry, everyone. This guy has no sense of common decency or rules. Kyle shrugged as if to amuse the crowd. The new hires exchanged uncertain murmurs, unsure if they should laugh. Of course. There's nothing funny about this. They don't understand the dynamics between Kyle and me, so it's natural they'd be confused. I had no choice. Suppressing my rising anger with all my might, I stood up. Excuse me, may I start my speech? What? You're seriously going to do your speech? Not understanding his tone, I stood there frozen. Then Kyle boldly began to insult me. This guy supposedly got hired for his experience, but honestly, he was just a filler. Our company doesn't usually hire mid-career folks. Kyle sought agreement from the other managers, including Thomas. No, that's not true. I heard Mr. Howard vouched for his excellence, which is why he was hired. The other executives nodded in agreement with Thomas's rebuttal. They all appreciated my work. They were kind people who subtly protected me from Kyle's tyranny. Oh yes, you guys only see the surface. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Kyle continued undeterred. This old man is over 40. There's no way someone like him can bring fresh ideas like you young folks. With all due respect, I've done my best over these past 6 months. Effort and results are two different things. I've had the opportunity to be involved in major projects. Oh, you mean the one I generously handed to you out of pity? I wanted to vehemently disagree. I was assigned that project because Kyle's proposal wasn't accepted, so it was handed to me urgently. Since I had to change the fundamental concept, he was furious and accused me of tarnishing his reputation. That memory is still fresh. That incident was only a month ago. Kyle had always been spiteful, but in the last month, his remarks had intensified. No doubt, that incident fueled his desire to torment me even more. But, using the important orientation to do this while Mr. Howard and Timothy were absent was unforgivable. I had brushed off his comments until now, but being humiliated in front of so many people made my blood boil. Maybe I thought he was just young and inexperienced. By assuming that, I might be at fault for letting his attack slide. I should have reported his behavior to other employees or bosses earlier on. Now, there's no one to stop Kyle's rampage. I thought about just walking out. But then I glanced toward the back of the room and saw panicked employees. They were desperately signaling to me, trying to convey something. The employees were vigorously shaking their heads and making an X with their arms in front of their bodies. What are they doing? At that moment, I remembered an important fact. This is really bad. If this continues, it will definitely turn out poorly. I realized I had to stop Kyle's verbal abuse somehow. I approached Kyle and tried to turn off the microphone. What are you doing? Don't touch it. I understand you have things you want to say, but this isn't the right time. Please, I'm asking you. Maybe my calmness irritated him. Kyle got even more heated. Shut up. Why are you the one giving the speech instead of me, you loser? Calm down, Kyle. Shut up. Don't you dare boss me around, you lowly employee. Kyle continued to hurl insults like idiot and fool at me as I desperately tried to stop him. It doesn't matter how much you try to communicate if the other person isn't willing to listen. Why should I be the one to stop him despite being insulted like this? These thoughts crossed my mind when... Everyone, please don't end up like this old man. He's a disgrace to the company. The eyes of the 77 new hires bore into me. I couldn't take it anymore. I see, I won't stop you anymore. I withdraw from giving the speech. That's right, I'll handle the speech, you stay out of the way. I left the venue immediately. Of course, I didn't attend the dinner party after the orientation. The next morning, I woke up to see a missed call from Mr. Howard. It was just past 6 a.m. Wondering what was going on, I called back. Sorry about what happened at the orientation. I heard my nephew caused trouble after I left. No, it's fine. Mr. Howard apologized sincerely. And about that, it has become a big issue. What? Can you come to the office as soon as possible? I'll credit you for the overtime, please come to my office. Certainly, I'll be there by 7. I hurriedly got ready. Walking at twice my usual pace, I arrived at the office. In the president's office, Mr. Howard, Timothy, and a pale-faced Kyle were waiting. Kyle was trembling as he read the newspaper. Mr. Howard and Timothy were glaring at him sternly. Good morning. Sorry to bother you so early. Sean, did you see any news online or in the papers last night or this morning? I shook my head immediately. I went home in a terrible mood and fell asleep without checking anything. But what does that have to do with anything? I glanced at Kyle, who looked pale, and a thought came to mind. Is it possible that the orientation was covered in the news? Kyle suddenly looked up at me. His face was a mix of anger and panic. Mr. Howard handed me the local newspaper he was holding. A large headline caught my eyes. Middle-aged man harassed and withdraws speech at orientation. Former employee names culprit. This is serious. The article featured a photo of Kyle insulting me, detailing his actions at the orientation. Although his eyes were blacked out, it was obvious that it was Kyle. I read through the article. Harassment incident at a company's orientation. In an era where corporate compliance is crucial, a shocking event has come to light. The stage was set at the orientation of an emerging advertising agency. The victim was a man in his 40s, identified as Mr. S. During the orientation, when he attempted to give a speech, he was publicly insulted by manager K, who was in his 30s, and had to leave the scene. A former employee testified that manager K had been harassing Mr. S for some time. This issue has also spread across the internet and social media. The company is currently conducting an internal investigation, and if manager K's actions are confirmed, they plan to take strict measures. There's no doubt about it. It's about what happened yesterday. How did this happen, and how did the newspaper get this story? Kyle, I told you yesterday to stop your comments. He nodded weakly. The orientation was live-streamed on our company's official video sharing platform. What? Being a social media-focused advertising agency, our company had recently gained a lot of attention. We decided to live-stream the orientation to showcase our company to a wider audience. Kyle had attended the meeting where this was decided, but he seemed to have no memory of it. As usual, he might have been dozing off. According to Mr. Howard in Timothy, viewers who watched the live stream started posting on social media about the crazy incident happening right now, drawing even more attention to the orientation. As a result, many people saw Kyle's insulting remarks and my withdrawal from the speech in real time. It caused a massive uproar on social media. I opened our company's official video sharing platform on my phone. The orientation video had garnered a lot of comments. Isn't it over for a company with a manager like this? Poor Sean. The company should take responsibility. This is the age of social media. Anything that happens gets captured and shared immediately. Why didn't you stop me? I tried to cut the microphone, but you kept going, Kyle. No way. Oh. The employees at the back were shaking their heads the whole time. You finally noticed. Yes. And no one informed you afterward? Kyle fell silent. That was the answer. He had no allies in the company where he threw his weight around. He probably finished the orientation without knowing anything, and now he is here. And the self-inflicted misfortunes that befell Kyle did not end there. Kyle, is this true? The social media posts detailed Kyle's numerous misdeeds. Falsifying expenses, pressuring subordinates to resign, claiming good ideas as his own. Kyle's eyes widened in shock. Sean. Is this your revenge? No, it's not me. This is true. Why would I waste my time posting about Kyle's wrongdoings on social media? Reading business books would be far more productive. This is all because you got hired as a mid-career recruit. Our company doesn't usually hire mid-career people. You're just a useless, arrogant old man. That's something I can't ignore. What? Uncle, why are you? Stop calling me uncle at the company. I was the one who interviewed and decided to hire him. Why? This old guy from a different industry is useless. Yet everyone listens to him? It makes me sick. As Kyle pointed a finger at me, I began to understand. So, that's how he felt about me. Kyle, I may have come from a different industry, but I consider myself quite knowledgeable about advertising strategies using social media. What? What are you talking about? An old man like you can't handle social media. His words were harsh. But I knew that once he saw what I had to show, his opinion might change. I opened my phone and showed him a certain social media account. That account, it's always going viral. Yes. It's the one I manage. What? Even while working in a completely different field, I couldn't give up one dream. I wanted to create advertisements with entertainment value that could reach people around the world. It all started with a small event. In middle school, I entered a poster contest hosted by an advertising agency and won the grand prize. Seeing my poster displayed prominently at the train station, people passing by would look at it. Some even talked about the product advertised on the poster, saying it looked interesting. That was the beginning of my dream. But dreams don't come true easily. There are many people with skills and passion like mine. I couldn't get a job in my desired field right out of college. Even so, I couldn't abandon my old dream and kept trying different things on social media, sharing information, and helping to promote products, while waiting for a chance. That work caught the eye of Mr. Howard, leading to my mid-career hiring. Why didn't you mention that earlier? I wanted to demonstrate my abilities regardless of my background. Damn it. If I'd known, I would have taken all your projects for myself. But I trashed most of them. I frowned. Most of my proposals never got approved. So that was all his doing. I turned a blind eye because you're my nephew, but I didn't expect you to be this rotten. There are also social media posts claiming most of Kyle's work was done by his subordinates. Should we conduct an internal investigation, Mr. Howard? Of course. Verify the truth. Sean, I'm really sorry. Not at all. I felt overwhelmed as Mr. Howard bowed to me. I only took you in because your parents begged me, but this is unacceptable. You're fired, Kyle. What? Wait, Uncle. Why? Harassment and embezzlement. There's no way I can overlook such behavior. Kyle collapsed to the floor, stunned. The results of the internal investigation came out. Kyle had harassed many other employees besides me. It was also revealed that he had been embezzling company funds. Needless to say, he was fired. Now, Kyle is infamous and can't walk outside without being chased and labeled as the insulting manager by many people. With his real name and face exposed on social media, Kyle's reputation in the industry plummeted to rock bottom. I heard through the grapevine that his parents covered the money he embezzled. They also abandoned him, saying, "We can't take care of you anymore." Because of his actions, he can't find a new job. Given his excessive harassment and embezzlement, it's only natural. No company would want to hire him when a simple search of his name on social media reveals all his misdeeds. He is now reportedly financially and mentally exhausted. I've heard that he's become extremely paranoid about being watched and has withdrawn from society. He's also financially distressed and in debt. On the other hand, I was appointed as Kyle's successor. Thanks to social media, my past achievement of winning the grand prize in the advertising agency's poster contest became widely known. I received many words of encouragement. The company has also started hiring mid-career employees. A fresh breeze of change is definitely in the air. The new hires who attended the orientation show no signs of mocking me like Kyle did, and they are eager to learn. I genuinely believe they are all very straightforward and highly receptive. I plan to pass on everything I've experienced to the next generation. I want to continue spreading the message that age doesn't matter, and you can achieve your dreams if you don't give up. Thank you for having us today. After nearly a year, I found myself back in the field of sales. My mouth was going dry as I greeted our client with a hoarse voice. The memory of my failure from a year ago flashed in my mind, making me want to run away. Just then, my female supervisor, Susan, who was standing next to me, gently patted my back. When I glanced at her, she nodded reassuringly, as if to say everything would be all right. Encouraged by her, I put all my strength into delivering my sales pitch. At that moment, I had no idea yet. I had no idea how much meeting her would impact my life. My name is Charlie. Until about a year ago, I thought I was walking a fairly smooth path in life. I graduated from a prestigious high school and got into a well-known university straight away. Then returned to my hometown to join the Riverside branch of Clearwater Bakery. Even though friends and professors from my university told me I could find a better job with my degree, I had a strong reason to return home. My mother was often ill, and I wanted to be there for her as much as possible. My father had passed away before I started elementary school, and my mother raised me on her own ever since. When my mother collapsed at work during my university years, I decided I would work in my hometown. Clearwater Bakery is a nationwide company, but their local products are developed and manufactured at the branch offices. I was fortunate enough to be assigned to the product development department, as I had hoped. Being a local myself, I had a good sense of the community's food preferences. Initially, I assisted senior employees in product development, but after 3 years, I began taking on more central roles and projects. It was around my 31st birthday, about a year ago, that I stumbled into trouble. I had a disagreement with my direct supervisor, David, who was the team leader for new product development. I believe we should use locally grown pears. It would support local consumption and the quality is vastly superior. I expressed my opinion about using pears in a new tart-style pastry. David furrowed his brow and said, "We can't afford any more costs. Our pastries are already more expensive than competitors because of the quality. If we get left behind in the price competition, it'll hurt our sales." He insisted on using cheaper imported pears. My colleagues understood my point but advised me to follow David's lead. Had I heeded their advice, things might have turned out differently. However, I was adamant about using local pears. As I toured local farms in line with our company's policy of supporting local consumption, I grew determined to incorporate their produce. Despite my persistence, David forced a team vote and his opinion prevailed. Not only that, but he also accused me of deliberately obstructing product development and demanded my transfer from the department. Coincidentally, there was an opening in the sales department at that time, sealing my fate. Responding to David's complaint, the management transferred me to the 3rd Sales Division. Despite being removed from product development, I wasn't disheartened. In fact, I was determined to excel in sales to earn more money for my mother's medical bills. But that determination backfired, and I soon fell out of favor with my new boss. 3 days after joining the 3rd Sales Division, I went on a sales call with my manager, Jim. Jim offered to show me the ropes, as I had no experience in sales. The key is to make regular visits. Even if we don't see immediate results, our persistence could eventually lead to sales. Jim explained as we headed to a drugstore that sold not just medicines and daily necessities, but also food items. Nervous on my first sales call, I tried the sales pitch techniques I had learned over the past 3 days. I leveraged my product development background to highlight the benefits of our new products. The client listened with a smile, but Jim interrupted me, saying, "Stop with the self-centered sales talk. They're taking time out for us." We quickly left the store after Jim apologized to the client. Apparently, the purpose of today's visit was to greet the client and thank them for their continued business. And Jim had already settled the sales negotiations over the phone. In other words, I had wasted their time by rehashing an already decided deal. Honestly, I can't trust someone like you with sales. "You're on menial tasks from tomorrow," Jim declared. Since that failure, I haven't been taken on any sales calls despite being in the 3rd Sales Division. Unable to quit the job due to my mother's situation, I've spent the past year doing menial tasks. One day, a female employee transferred to the 3rd Sales Division from Clearwater Bakery's headquarters. My name is Susan. My title is Assistant Manager, but I'm new here, so I look forward to your guidance and support. The female employee, who was more than 10 centimeters taller than me in her pumps, was named Susan. With well-maintained black hair tied in a ponytail, she was a striking beauty with distinctive almond-shaped eyes. She had a gentle demeanor, always responding with a warm smile no matter who spoke to her. However, when it came to work, her expression turned sharp and she spoke clearly, leaving many employees wide-eyed at the contrast. Rumors among the staff suggested that Susan was an elite from the headquarters. And she is here to learn managerial duties while overseeing the branch's operations as an assistant manager. Indeed, shortly after her arrival, she brought a fresh approach to our sales team by calmly suggesting, "I have a proposal," and introduced a sales method used at the headquarters. Susan was also a graduate of a prestigious university, but she had lived a completely different life from mine. I perceived her as a distant figure, so I was surprised when she approached me on her 3rd day during lunch break. "You're Charlie, right? Why aren't you going on sales calls?" she asked gently. Although she seemed to be around my age, her title as assistant manager placed her above me. Determined not to be disrespectful, I straightened up and replied nervously, "Well, I'm mainly in charge of menial tasks." When she asked what I meant by that, I explained how I had not been taken on any sales calls since my blunder a year ago. She nodded slightly and said, "I see. Thank you," before leaving. I thought our lives would never intersect again, feeling a bit disappointed. However, over the next week, Susan spoke to me frequently, whether it was for menial tasks or not. Her main topic was the limited edition products developed at the Riverside branch. She thought I could provide detailed insights on local products despite being in the sales division, given my background in product development. Of course, I know the product data, but hearing from the person who developed them is invaluable, she said, smiling brightly like a child while savoring the local bread. I was grateful to Susan for treating me without prejudice, despite my ostracized status since my failure a year ago. 10 days after Susan's arrival, she directly asked Jim if she could go out on sales calls herself, having learned the managerial tasks under him. Jim hesitated for a moment but then agreed, "You've completed our training curriculum, so there's no issue." "All right, someone will guide you." Susan waved her hand dismissively and said, "I'll go with Charlie. It's a waste to leave talent unused. I'd like him to experience sales." "Is that all right, Jim?" With a gentle yet insistent smile, she persuaded Jim. Reluctantly, Jim sighed and said, "Charlie, it's your turn. Don't screw up," instructing me in a resigned tone. Surprised by this unexpected opportunity, I stood up and said, "Yes. I'll get ready right away," gathering the necessary materials before heading out of the office with Susan. Naturally, I took the driver's seat in the company car. From the passenger seat, Susan, looking at her phone, directed, "We've got an appointment with Parker's Market. But there is still some time. So let's stop by a nearby branch first. As long as we make it to their headquarters by 11. Her clear and decisive tone was a stark contrast to her previous gentle manner, almost overwhelming me. This must be her work mode. Parker's Market was a local supermarket chain centered in my area. Susan, who had recently moved here, hadn't yet had a chance to thoroughly check out Parker's Market. "I want to see what products they have with my own eyes," she said passionately, prompting me to park at one of their branches. After spending about 20 minutes browsing the store, we hurried to the Parker's Market headquarters. Despite the sudden visit, the store's representative, John, graciously welcomed us into the meeting room. After exchanging pleasantries and presenting our gifts, we prepared to start the business discussion. "Thank you for having us." My mouth was dry, and I couldn't speak as smoothly as I wanted. The memory of my failure from a year ago haunted me. If I failed again, I might lose my job this time. Feeling anxious, I felt Susan gently pat my back. I recalled the words she had said to me in the car on our way here. "If anything happens, I'll back you up. Give it your all. Don't worry, I've got your back." Wanting to repay Susan for giving me this chance, I steeled myself and presented the prepared materials to John. "Today, we've brought a new bread we're planning to launch. As you can see in the data, it has a stronger wheat aroma and a more elastic texture than our previous products." When I signaled to Susan, she promptly took out samples of the bread, cut them into bite-sized pieces, and offered them to John. John nodded as he tasted the bread. Indeed, wheat lovers will find this irresistible. The texture is excellent. It should be great toasted as well. Sensing his interest, I decided to use the knowledge I had gained during our visit to the Parker's Market branch. Parker's Market sells vegetable jams made collaboratively by local farmers, right? I think these jams would pair wonderfully with this bread. What do you think? As if she had been waiting for my words, Susan laid out the 5 types of vegetable jams we had purchased earlier at Parker's Market on the table. John sampled each jam on the bite-sized pieces of bread and said, "This is excellent. These jams, which are made to highlight the natural flavors of the ingredients with minimal seasoning, pair wonderfully with your bread's strong wheat aroma. This is fantastic. I'd love to sell them as a set." He acknowledged the great pairing of the bread and vegetable jams. Sensing this was my chance, I began presenting one new product after another to John. I not only covered the information in the materials but also delved into more detailed explanations, which made John nod in appreciation multiple times. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, he concluded, "Thank you for introducing such wonderful products. We'll be ordering not just the bread but also a variety of other products in greater quantities. We look forward to working with you more closely." Not only had we achieved our primary goal of selling the bread, but we also succeeded in increasing the variety and quantity of products Parker's Market would carry. I stood there, mouth agape at the unexpected outcome. Susan lightly patted my back and said, "Thank you for your continued support. We look forward to working with you," bowing her head. Following her lead, I bowed as well, saying, "We appreciate your support," savoring the success of our sales effort. On the drive back to the Riverside branch, Susan voiced her admiration. "I knew you were capable, but I didn't expect you to be able to pitch the products so well, especially when I called on you so suddenly. How were you able to explain the products so fluently?" It turned out that Susan wanted me to re-experience sales as a stepping stone for my return to the field. But she hadn't expected such a successful outcome. I still keep in touch with the guys in the product development department. They often ask me to taste new products during the development process. Even as a newbie, they trusted my palate, I explained. Despite being transferred to the sales department, my colleagues in product development still saw me as one of their own, often seeking my advice on new products. The breads we pitched today at Parker's Market were ones I had tasted extensively during their development, allowing me to provide John with detailed information not included in the materials. "I see, that explains it. In any case, you can return to the office with your head held high now," Susan murmured with a proud expression on her face. I was glad to see her happy. I was more pleased about the fact that Susan was happy than about the success in sales. After we returned to the office, Susan reported our success to the members of the third sales division, leaving them astonished. But Susan remained composed and said, "If you doubt it, feel free to contact John at Parker's Market. He'll tell you how excellent the presentation was." With a calm smile, she declared. Then she glanced at me and continued, "Sure, he might have failed once, but he has the skills to succeed in negotiations like today. Instead of writing him off for a single mistake, isn't it important to create an environment where talents like Charlie can thrive?" she asked Jim. Thanks to Susan's advocacy, I was allowed to start going on sales calls with the other employees from the next day. For the next 6 months, I worked diligently to make the most of the opportunities Susan had given me. I didn't think I had ever worked as hard, not even during my university entrance exams or my time in product development. As a result, 6 months later, I had achieved one of the top sales records in the third sales division. Around that time, I heard a rumor. Susan was going to return to the headquarters soon. If that happened, I might never see her again. Feeling desperate, I invited her to dinner one day during lunch break. Under the pretense of formally thanking her for giving me a chance to go on a sales call after a year. I expected her to decline, but she agreed with a smile. After work, we sat across from each other at a chic French restaurant near the station. "Thanks to the opportunity you gave me, I've been able to establish myself as a member of the sales team. I'm truly grateful," I said, bowing deeply shortly after our toast. Susan chuckled softly and shook her head. "I only gave you the chance to take the first step. Everything else is thanks to your hard work and talent. You did an excellent job." She praised me gently, in a tone different from her work mode. Her more natural voice made my heart race as I asked the question I had always wanted to ask. "Why did you give me that chance back then? I've always wondered what made you take notice of a menial worker like me." Susan fell silent, gazing into space thoughtfully. Then, widening her almond-shaped eyes, she said with a slightly playful tone, "Maybe because you reminded me of my younger self." She began to share her own experiences. "I used to play volleyball in school. With my build and decent athleticism, I was quickly picked as the ace when I started high school. But not everyone liked that, and I faced some harassment from classmates and seniors. As our wine refills arrived, we both took a sip." Susan continued after a slow exhale. "One senior spoke up during a meeting, asking why they were dragging me down when everyone knew I had the skills. She said helping me perform at my best would lead the team to victory." Susan paused, frowning slightly, and then shook her head. That senior had lost her starting position to me. When I later asked why she spoke up for me, she simply said it was the right thing to do. I was deeply moved and decided I would always help someone in a similar situation. So that's how it was. When I expressed my gratitude for her sharing this, Susan waved her hand dismissively and said, "It's really just my own satisfaction. So don't worry about it. More importantly, I assigned you to that negotiation because I believed you had the skills. Based on what I heard about your work in product development and as a menial worker." She had done her research on me without my knowing. Despite her busy schedule, she took the time to look into a single subordinate's background, truly exemplifying what a manager should be. Before I could express this to her, she clapped her hands and said, "Oh, by the way, I heard that the product development team is rallying to have you back. It seems they're ready to take you in. Are you planning to return?" She asked about a topic that had only been discussed internally. Surprised that she knew about it, I replied, "Actually, I'm torn. I know the product development work is fulfilling, but I really enjoy my sales work now. And above all," I swallowed hard, just like on that day 6 months ago, and encouraged myself. I would regret it if I didn't say it now. With the determination to avoid that regret, I looked Susan straight in the eye and said, "Right now, I don't want to be apart from you. I want to stay in the sales department because I want to be with you for as long as possible." I expressed my honest feelings directly. Perhaps shocked by my words, Susan's face turned red as she said, "I'm surprised. Can you explain that a bit more? I don't want to misunderstand in a weird way." She pressed her tear-filled eyes. Worried, I explained that my initial feelings were admiration and respect, but as we worked together, the time spent with her became invaluable. I earnestly conveyed that now I wanted to walk through life together with her. Susan, after taking a deep breath and looking at me, said, "I'm going back to the headquarters soon. When that happens, I'll suggest to both the headquarters and Riverside branch that you be assigned to the headquarters as well." Her statement confirmed the rumors and surprised me with the proposal of being assigned to the headquarters. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, puzzled. Susan raised her hand to signal me to wait and, with a gentle smile, explained, "Charlie, you once said that if you ever returned to product development, you would want to be involved in developing nationwide products. Not just local ones. The headquarters product development department is looking for new talent." When I mentioned a promising employee with experience in both product development and sales, they were eager to have you. As I listened to her, I felt a surge of excitement. It reminded me of a lunch conversation we once had. I had come to understand the joy of sales, but I still wanted to return to product development someday. My true desire was to be involved in developing nationwide products for Clearwater Bakery. I'm very pleased with the proposal. But how does this relate to what I just confessed? I asked, still confused. She smiled wryly and said, "You're surprisingly dense. It means I feel the same way you do. Let's be a couple and work together at the headquarters. Of course, I remember you telling me about your mother, so I won't force you if it's too difficult." She looked at me with lowered eyes. Amazed that my heartfelt confession had succeeded, I bowed vigorously, saying, "Thank you very much," only to hit my forehead on the table. Susan, stifling a laugh at my clumsiness, gently touched my reddened forehead and said, "Charlie, you're unexpectedly clumsy. That's cute too. Let's get to know each other better from now on." She gently caressed my reddened forehead. After becoming Susan's boyfriend, I was deeply troubled about the headquarters assignment. Her proposal was extremely attractive, and I truly wanted to work at the headquarters. From the moment she mentioned it, I had been eager to start at the headquarters. However, I felt guilty about leaving my ailing mother behind. Seeing my dilemma, Susan made an unexpected proposal. "Let's talk to your mother about everything. I'd like to meet her too." With that, she came to the apartment where I lived with my mother. My mother was surprised by the sudden introduction of my girlfriend, but she quickly took a liking to Susan's straightforward personality and said, "He's a bit unreliable, but please take care of him," clearly pleased. After the introductions, Susan made another surprising statement. "Ma'am, would you consider moving to Tokyo with us? In Tokyo, there would be more hospital options. Of course, if you prefer to stay here, we will respect that. But I don't want to give up on either him or my job. If I was worried about leaving my mother, why not take her with us?" It was an idea that had never occurred to me. Explaining the details to my astonished mother, Susan patiently outlined everything. Listening and nodding, my mother turned to me and said, "Don't worry about me. You two go to Tokyo. You've done enough for me." She took a bank book from the living room cabinet and handed it to me. "This is the money you gave me for hospital bills. I've saved it all here, so take it with you. If you came to introduce her to me, It means you're serious about getting married. You'll need money for various things, so here you go. My mother had been saving the money I gave her for hospital bills, planning to return it to me one day. Refusing it would be like rejecting her kindness. Accepting the bank book with both hands, I said, "Thank you. I'll do my best." Feeling a warmth in my chest, I declared my resolve. Meanwhile, Susan, with teary eyes, took my mother's hand and said, "Thank you, ma'am." With a trembling voice, I thanked my mother. Assigned to the headquarters, Susan and I achieved outstanding results in our respective departments, earning recognition for our work in product development and sales. The success I found in developing several hit products was largely due to my experiences in both regional product development and sales. 1 year after starting at the headquarters, Susan and I shared the same last name and began living under one roof. Now, Susan was taking the vacation days she had hardly used before, preparing for the future. Less than a month after our wedding, we learned that she was expecting. "I want to make sure everything is perfect for this baby. Don't worry, your mother will be coming soon. So, you can go to work with peace of mind," Susan said as she saw me off, already looking every bit a mother. Gently caressing her belly, I said, "All right, I'm off," and stood on tiptoe to kiss my wife. Determined to bring happiness to Susan and our child who changed my life, I set off to work with renewed purpose. I could feel my sense of responsibility as a husband and a father growing stronger every day. My name is Tom, and I'm 35 years old. I'm currently working at a local company called a corporation. Originally, I wanted to attend an industrial college, but my parents refused to pay for my tuition. So, I saved up by working part-time whenever I could and managed to go to college. Eventually, I was able to land the job I wanted. Many of my peers had financial support from their parents and were always having fun, making a lot of noise. I bet they never had to worry about money, never had to juggle studying for exams and working part-time. I remember thinking that as I watched them. They were good people, but their conversations were always about girls, darts, drinking, and the cute girls at their part-time jobs. Meanwhile, my small savings from high school weren't enough, so I was always working. We had different topics, values, and financial situations. I was always exhausted from studying and working, so I couldn't really become friends with them. But I couldn't afford to complain about my situation. I knew I couldn't rely on my parents, so I worked as hard as I could. My parents were both remarried, and my sister and I were only half-siblings. My sister, Jenna, was 12 years younger than me. She resembled my stepmother and was both cute and beautiful. I adored her, but I felt like I was only half a part of the family, which made me feel out of place at home. However, my parents seemed to prefer living just the two of them, so they almost ignored us, which minimized the awkwardness with my stepmother. They were always going out together and came home late, so we rarely saw them. While our parents provided for our basic needs, we hardly ever talked. Maybe that's why Jenna and I became somewhat quiet and introverted. As Jenna grew older, she stopped talking to me much and stayed in her room most of the time. I didn't know what she was like at school, but she stopped smiling at home, and I worried about her. I tried to talk to her as much as I could. At first, she seemed annoyed, but I kept trying. I kept the conversations going with simple things like "dinner's ready" or "welcome back," talking about TV shows and little things that happened during the day, just trivial stuff. I made sure never to ask personal questions like how's school or anything too intrusive. That was because, for some people whose relations with friends are not very good, those questions were what they didn't want to be asked. Jenna probably thought I was an annoying brother, but at least I wasn't someone she wanted to avoid completely. Eventually, she started to talk and even smile a bit with me. I disliked our parents, but I loved Jenna. I was happy to reconnect with her. I got a job when Jenna turned 12. If I had really wanted to, I could have left home and lived away from my parents, whom I didn't like very much. However, I felt it wouldn't be good for Jenna's mental health to leave her, who was already going through a difficult adolescence, alone with our indifferent parents. Our parents only cared about their own happiness and resented spending any money on us. In elementary and middle school, when expenses were low, we managed to live relatively well. But once I reached high school and needed money for tuition and activities, their attitude became increasingly hostile. They were always in a bad mood, and it got worse whenever money was mentioned. Reluctantly, they give me the money, but every chance they get, they make a genuinely displeased face and complain about how much it cost. My parents loved shopping. Mom had a sweet tooth and practically lived for buying clothes, cosmetics, and hobbies whenever she went out. Dad drank a lot and enjoyed socializing, so he often dined out. Because of their habits and Dad's modest income, there was no money left for us to do what we liked. Feeling a sense of crisis about my future, I talked to my advisor and homeroom teacher in high school, asking for permission to work part-time on weekends and holidays. Normally, they would have told me to focus on studying and extracurriculars, but after a meeting with my parents, it became clear they had no intention of paying for anything beyond basic living expenses and tuition. We'll pay for the minimum costs of living for the kids, but beyond that, we don't see the need. They're not small children anymore, they should manage their own expenses, my father said without hesitation. Seeing my father's expression, my teachers understood everything. After my father left the room, the teachers remained silent for a while before simply saying, "Do your best," and I started working at a nearby fast food restaurant. Balancing work with school activities was exhausting. I had to study hard since private schools were out of the question, and I also had to maintain my friendships. In hindsight, being constantly exhausted and too busy to dwell on my drawbacks or lack of friends was a blessing in disguise. Despite always being tired, I managed to live fairly well with Jenna in a house where adults were almost non-existent. One day, when Jenna turned 23, she suddenly told me she had a boyfriend. I was shocked because Jenna had always been shy and unapproachable. Apparently, a businessman who frequented her workplace had approached her. Given that Jenna was undeniably beautiful, it made sense, though I had mixed feelings. "I think you know, Tom, but I hate this house. I've managed to endure it so far because you were here. But now I can't stop the feeling of not wanting to come back here." Even though I've only known him for a short time, he asked me to marry him. I know he said it quickly because he knows my situation. We've only been dating for 3 months, but I want to marry Joshua. I was so taken aback by the surprisingly short duration of Jenna's relationship with her yet-to-be-seen boyfriend that I almost fell over. I understood her feelings. But marrying an unproven man could lead to future hardships for her. "Let me meet him first and then decide if you can marry him," I said, and Jenna reluctantly agreed. "Well, I plan to introduce him to you anyway." "Okay," she replied. Jenna was still just 23. And now, without any professional or romantic experience, she's trying to run away with a man she met just 3 months ago. Thinking of marrying someone without deeply knowing his character is risky, and it's probably because Jenna is still young and naive. Although I don't have a lot of experience, I do have some, and I've heard stories from friends who have had bad experiences with unpleasant women. Because of that, I felt a twinge of unease about Jenna marrying someone she only knew on the surface. Despite my concerns, Jenna seemed happier than ever. Until now, she had been either expressionless or only smiled when talking to me. But now she has a calm expression that anyone can see radiates a pink or light orange aura, and she looks full of life. Seeing her like that, I felt a bit relieved. Surely, he must be treating Jenna well. If that's the case, it should be okay, I thought, looking forward to the day I would meet him. But my hope was about to be shattered. The meeting was set at a fancy restaurant chosen by her boyfriend. Ignoring my warnings, Jenna was set on getting married, saying, "Oh, by the way, the meeting is a marriage introduction. His parents will be there. So please act as our parents." She smiled as she said this. Seeing Jenna's smile, I was starting to feel like nothing I said would matter. I was almost resigned. No, but if he turned out to be a terrible guy, I would have to oppose it firmly. I'm the only one who can protect Jenna. Our parents, who had always been reluctant to raise us, had stopped coming home after Jenna graduated high school. Suspecting something, I checked our family registry. Fortunately, our family ties weren't severed, but our parents stopped coming home entirely. Since Jenna was almost an adult, they had essentially abandoned us. From then on, it was just Jenna and me living together. So, while we were related by blood, we were no longer a family. When Jenna learned our parents had left, she just looked resigned and immediately started looking for a high-paying part-time job. After I insisted she not sell herself short, she ended up working night shifts at a family restaurant while attending college. Because she wasn't very strong, she couldn't work as much as she wanted. So, I covered some of our living expenses with my earnings while she paid for her tuition and part of her living costs. Later, when her job search didn't go well, Jenna decided to take a full-time position at her part-time job. Although the work environment was tough, she preferred it to an office job with desk work, and she seemed to enjoy it. I was proud of Jenna's growth, but I couldn't let some random guy take her away. I had come to feel like a parent to her. For the next few days, Jenna and I were busy with work, and before we knew it, the promised day had arrived. I was so nervous that I arrived at the restaurant 50 minutes early, and Jenna laughed at my awkwardness in a suit. However, her smile seemed forced. She must have been nervous too. Her boyfriend's parents were a big shot at an auto parts manufacturer and a head nurse at a county hospital, a rather elite family. Her boyfriend had also landed a job at a major company in the city. Jenna, clearly nervous, was overly chatty. Seeing her like that made me even more nervous, and we both awkwardly tried to converse. Right on time, her boyfriend and his parents arrived. His name was Joshua. He was tall and slender, with a modern hairstyle that made him look like someone who would be very popular with women. The suit he was wearing was undoubtedly much more expensive and sophisticated than mine. His parents, too, had stern expressions and were impeccably dressed. His father had a harsh, stubborn look that made him seem unapproachable. His mother didn't smile at all and stared at me with a blank, mask-like expression. Feeling intimidated, I greeted them with a smile, and we all entered the restaurant. Even after we sat down, his parents scrutinized me with harsh eyes. Joshua, on the other hand, spoke kindly, "Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming today. I'm Joshua, and I've been dating Jenna. We are considering marriage." I introduced myself, and the atmosphere relaxed a bit. It was Jenna's first time meeting his parents, and she was visibly tense. Then, Joshua's father, Michael, asked, "What a beautiful young lady. Your parents must be very handsome too. Why are you here alone today? Aren't your parents coming?" When I explained, mixing in a lie, that my father and mother were too busy with work to come home often, Michael raised an eyebrow and said, "So, you're saying they are so busy they can't even attend this important pre-wedding meeting for their daughter? No matter how busy work is, they should find a way to be here for such an occasion. How can they prioritize work over this? What kind of parents do you have?" I was at a loss for words, unable to respond to his remarks. He was right. It was strange that our parents couldn't make time for such an important event. As I thought to myself that there was only so much I could do to cover up, I glanced over at Jenna. She looked bewildered, not knowing what to say. Joshua tried to cover for us. Well, her parents travel abroad often and hold important positions, so they might not have been able to change their schedules. But Michael asked, "So, will they attend the wedding?" Once again, we were speechless. Apparently, Michael sensed something from our reactions. His face quickly turned red with anger, and he said, "What? Are you saying your parents can't even attend the wedding? Such parents might as well not exist. I've heard that Jenna is earning her own tuition and living expenses. Are her parents, who are supposedly in respectable positions, really not giving her a single penny? If it's their educational policy that after high school, she should handle everything on her own, that's one thing. But normal parents, if they have a decent income, would at least provide for their child's living expenses so they can focus on their studies in college. A girl with parents like that is no good. This discussion is over. We don't need a girl with such parents in our family. Indeed, our father was so cold to us that it was as if he had left his heart somewhere else. But Jenna and I had worked hard to make it on our own. Although Jenna has some social awkwardness, she has developed a reasonable level of social skills by interacting more and more with people other than our parents. She is also a kind and just person. Jenna is kind to classmates who feel left out and treats them equally, even when other classmates tend to avoid them. For instance, during school trips and group projects, she would always invite the student who usually got left out before the teacher had to step in, doing so with a smile. That student was on the verge of becoming a truant, but thanks to Jenna's constant companionship and conversations, she managed to attend school every day. When I heard this from her teacher, I was moved to tears. Despite her often gloomy demeanor at home, Jenna had grown into such a compassionate person. Yet here she was, being insulted for things beyond her control. I couldn't stay silent. Michael, what are you saying? Sure, our parents might be a bit hands-off, but they raised us well. Jenna has always been praised by her teachers for her kindness and thoughtfulness. Just because our parents' approach differs from what you expect. Please don't speak of Jenna that way, I countered. Then Michael said, oh? So, your parents will be attending the wedding, right? Even if they are too busy to meet now. Surely they won't skip the wedding. Earlier, when I asked you about this, you didn't answer. Why is that? He grinned as if he was enjoying himself. Joshua quickly interjected, well, you see, her parents are currently involved in a major project overseas and can't easily come back. So, it might be difficult for them to attend the wedding. Michael looked incredulous. That's unacceptable. No matter how busy they are, parents should be there for their daughter's wedding. You think you can fool me? Your parents have abandoned you, haven't they? That's why they've left you alone. If that's not the case, let me speak with them via video call. Now. Jenna, following Joshua's lead, said, our parents are so busy that they barely have time to contact us. We don't know when they'll be available. Michael retorted, see? You're trying to keep us from speaking to your parents because you're not in touch with them. You think you can deceive us? But we see through you. I don't want someone without real parents in our family. Am I wrong? He stared at me with a piercing gaze. I realized it was impossible to deceive him any longer. Moreover, I couldn't imagine continuing a relationship with such an awful family, nor could I allow Jenna to become part of it. We might not have been blessed with the best parents, but we know many kids have had it worse. Working part-time while studying was tough, but I believe I handled my responsibilities much better than those carefree college students. We lived our lives seriously. To have our character judged based on our parents' treatment was too much. Joshua's parents, with their high social status, wanted a perfect daughter-in-law. He was judging Jenna's suitability as a potential daughter-in-law solely based on his perception that she might have mental issues. Just from observing the parents. Just because the parents are flawed doesn't mean the children are too. Of course, having children can bring unexpected challenges. Living with financial constraints can cause dissatisfaction. But Joshua's parents couldn't know Jenna well enough in such a short time to judge her. Michael needed to be taught a lesson for criticizing my sister. I had been smiling inwardly since I learned where he worked. Michael was just about to stand up, as if to say there was nothing more to discuss. To him, I declared. I should have mentioned earlier that I'm the CEO of a corporation. I believe you work for E Corp? Isn't that the company struggling and about to be absorbed by ours? We were just discussing staff reductions. In today's world, you have to stay innovative to survive. You say you don't need my sister, well, we don't need someone with such an inflexible mindset in our company either. Upon hearing my words, Michael froze with a shocked expression for a while. But then he suddenly changed his tone and said, what? I didn't know. I'm terribly sorry for my rude remarks. Please, I beg you, don't fire me. Yes, I worked in the same industry as Michael, and I was the CEO of a much larger company. After graduating from college, I originally intended to pursue a technical job in mechanical engineering. Upon joining Company A, I caught the attention of the CEO and steadily climbed the corporate ladder. A few years ago, due to the CEO's chronic health issues and the fact that he had no children, I was named his successor. Company A is a large company with about 4,000 employees, quite different from Michael's company. Although Michael's company is not small, it was nothing compared to mine. After that, I brushed off Michael's various attempts to placate me, took Jenna by the hand, and said, let's go. No matter how good he is. Having such people as in-laws will only make you suffer, Jenna. You deserve someone better. I then firmly led her out of the store. On the way home, seeing Jenna walking slowly and looking very downcast, my heart ached. She had worked so hard her entire life. Perhaps because of our parents, she likely struggled with the difficulty of life. Jenna had finally found someone she could truly trust. I knew Joshua seemed like a good person. But having to deal with his parents during difficult times would be too hard. Because of this concern, I couldn't support their marriage. I had never seen Jenna so down before. While I felt a sense of satisfaction for protecting her from those awful in-laws, I never wanted to see her so sad. Jenna understood the issues with his parents and softly said, "What should I do now?" Joshua was a good person despite his parents. If she was prepared for it, maybe she could be with him. But I couldn't find the answer and all I could say was, "I'm sorry." Sometime later, Michael's company merged with ours, and I decided to fire him. Thinking of himself as an elite and strutting around, he unexpectedly had to end his professional career. It was said that his character was already reputed to be bad, so he never got re-employed by another company and is now unemployed. Rumors said he became self-destructive after losing his job, and his family was falling apart. I felt a bit sorry for Joshua, but maybe this would help him distance himself from his difficult parents. Jenna remained sad for a while but never blamed me. However, as she stopped talking to me, I began to feel sad, wondering if she still harbored some resentment. Even though it was unavoidable, the marriage had been called off. I feel like it would have fallen apart even without my involvement. Seeing Jenna so unhappy made me feel terrible. But then one day, Jenna suddenly said, "I'm sorry for always showing you my depressed side and ignoring you. But I don't think badly of you, Tom. I know you've always tried to protect me. But he's become just as important to me." So I was really down about not getting along with his parents. "Recently, I noticed you've been feeling down too." So I felt I needed to apologize. I looked at her in silence, and she continued. "I didn't have many close friends at school, and with parents like ours, I felt hopeless about having any fun in life. Before I started going to school, I mostly only talked to you, Tom, so I struggled a lot when I started elementary school. Everyone else chatted so easily with smiles on their faces. Having been so dependent on you, I didn't know what to do. I was always expecting and demanding things from others, so I couldn't hold a conversation properly for a long time. And home wasn't a comfortable place either, so I had nowhere to relax and got more and more exhausted. As I moved up in grades, people started to see me as the quiet kid. I hated that, but I didn't know how to be more outgoing, and I couldn't break out of that cycle. But you always tried to help me. Even when I spent all my time in my room using my phone as a high schooler, you would come to talk to me no matter how late you worked. Even when I pushed you away, you never gave up on me. At first, I thought it was annoying. I thought looking at my phone was more fun. You saw how Mom only made simple meals and worried about my health. So you learned to cook and made meals with lots of vegetables every day. Even when I didn't know what to talk about and just watched TV, you kept trying to talk to me. Because of that, I slowly learned how to have conversations with people. At first, I was exhausted and thought, "Please just leave me alone to eat by myself," but gradually, I realized how fun it was to talk to people. I used to think I had to talk about things others liked or about TV shows, but I realized I was overthinking it. The things you talked about were always simple, and talking about those things made my heart feel lighter. That's why, even when school was boring, I could keep going. I really appreciate everything you've done for me, Tom." Jenna started crying, saying she was sorry for everything. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. I could always chat about trivial things, but at a moment like this, I couldn't find the words. I felt like a failure as a brother. As I held her, I kept repeating, "You'll find someone better, Jenna, someone better." Jenna, crying in my arms, said yes and then didn't say anything else. I kept rubbing her back. After some time, Jenna seemed to have recovered, at least on the surface. She went back to her job and seemed happy again. However, perhaps because of what happened before, she turns down every offer from customers. Maybe she still can't forget about him. Despite all my efforts to protect her, this time, I could only watch over her. A few months later, Joshua cut ties with his parents completely, and he and Jenna got married. Even though there are some things I'm worried about, I always tell Jenna to let me know if she ever needs help. If anything happens, I want to assist Jenna as much as I can. We might only be half-siblings, but our bond had deepened because we didn't receive our parents' love. Now, Jenna had someone who would protect her even at the cost of abandoning his own parents. When I congratulated them, Joshua and Jenna smiled brighter than I'd ever seen them smile before. Next year, I'll finally become an uncle to a little girl. Joshua has remained the supportive partner he seemed to be, helping Jenna while working hard himself. I could tell Jenna wasn't suffering because her expression grew more peaceful each time we met. My little sister was going to be a mother. Whether she looked like Jenna or Joshua, their child would be adorable. I imagined myself spoiling my niece with toys and affection. Even before she was born, I was already planning to dote on her. Jenna, noticing my thoughts, smiled happily and said, "Uncle, thanks in advance for everything." There were many eyes looking at me with worried expressions. Everyone was reaching out to me, but I didn't know whose hand to take. I finally collapsed to my knees and sat down on the spot. Then, I woke up. It's been a while since I had that dream. I pulled my sweat-soaked t-shirt away from my skin and got up. I got out of bed and stared at the wall. There were several certificates with my name Hugo Reed written on them. A gold award for a book report I wrote in elementary school. In middle school, I consistently achieved good results in the kendo club. Until I was 15 and my sister was born, I worked really hard. Bringing home these solemn pieces of paper made my parents jump for joy. It doesn't matter if I take these with me. I reached out to the framed certificates on the wall. Suddenly, my bedroom door swung open with a bang. "Hugo, if you don't get up soon." "Oh, you're already awake. How many times do I have to tell you to knock before you come in? It's your fault for not locking the door." My sister, Lily, saluted and smiled brightly like the sun. "It's rare for you to wake up before me, Lily. What are you talking about? I'm 12 now. I've never been late since I became a senior in elementary school." Such a cheeky kid. "Who do you think walked you to school every day when you missed the group walk?" I sighed exaggeratedly, and Lily shrugged and laughed. "It's a typical peaceful and happy weekend morning. Anyone would see it that way. But between me and Lily, there's an invisible wall. A thick, high wall. Your room is still messy. Will you be ready in time? How long until the move?" Lily asked as she went down the stairs. I couldn't see the expression on her face as she talked to me. "Less than 3 weeks. So you need to make sure you can get up by yourself. You're so persistent. Aren't you going to be lonely without me?" I was at a loss for words. Sometimes I didn't know what to say in these everyday conversations. If I said I'd be lonely, Lily would be happy. But if I actually said it out loud, it would be a lie. Honestly, I wanted to say that a weight would finally be lifted off my shoulders. Because I've always felt that I didn't belong in this house. Lily must have found my silence strange. Before entering the living room, she turned to look at me. I smiled to cover it up, and Lily gave a vague smile in return. "Mom, Hugo is already up." Mom, who was in the kitchen, turned around. "Good morning, Hugo." I raised a hand to greet her, matching her smile, which was similar to Lily's. I didn't look like Mom, Dad, or Lily. Of course, that's only natural. In the summer when I was 8 and lost my parents. It was my adoptive mom and dad, people whose faces and names I didn't even know until that day, who reached out to me. Until 19 years ago, I was Hugo Smith. The person who took me in when I lost my home and family was Alice Reed, who was now serving me breakfast. She is my current mom. I'd like the flowers on each table to be white and orange, but do you think 2 colors might be too plain? Emily spread out the venue layout on the table and looked intently at the planner, Jessica. It depends on the number of flowers. Do you have any preferences, sir? I'm fine with whatever. Emily gently touched my arm as I answered, looking down. I'm the one who wants the wedding. Hugo is just accompanying me, so I'm grateful he even shows up for the meeting. Emily tilted her head and smiled, and I murmured sorry with just my mouth. In a month, Emily and I will be married. A week before we register our marriage, we'd moved into the house we chose together, and 6 months later, we'd have the wedding. There are 6 tables planned for the venue. Emily probably arranged it considering that I have no relatives to invite. At our first meeting, Emily had said, "It's good as long as we can invite our close family and friends." I'll create a sample image of the flowers for the next meeting. Thank you. Now, let's move on to the next topic. Jessica put away the layout. The next document she pulled out was the schedule for the day. I drank some iced tea to soothe my dry throat. Whether she knew my resolve or not, Emily squeezed my arm a bit tighter. You mentioned having a non-religious ceremony. As confirmed in our last meeting, are you fine with the typical flow? Yes. We're working on our vows now, so they should be ready by the next meeting. Emily glanced at me. I nodded lightly and scratched my nose. Jessica shrugged, I'm glad. I was a bit worried because it seemed like you weren't involved at all. And this is such an important day for you both. Emily's expression softened. The tension that had been scattered across her face began to ease. Next, I'd like to fill in the timeline for the reception. I understand that your college friends will be giving the toasts. Yes, they've agreed to do it. While Emily and Jessica continued the discussion, I put an ice cube from my empty glass into my mouth. I understood. I knew my lack of enthusiasm about the wedding was making Emily anxious. But imagining how the Reed family, who weren't my real family, would feel at my wedding made me hesitant. I'm relying on Emily's understanding of my feelings. After the letter to your parents, we'll have the speeches from both families. Is that okay? My family is fine with that, but Hugo, what about you? As we neared the end of confirming the reception flow, Emily put her finger to her chin, thinking. Then she looked at me seriously. What do you mean? I have no issue with you reading a letter to your parents. Hugo, do you have anything you want to say to your parents? Emily's round eyes wavered slightly. Wait a minute, it's common for the bride to read a letter to her parents at the reception, but I've never heard of the groom doing the same. I looked to Jessica for support, and she gave a troubled look. Indeed, it's not common. The groom usually gives the final speech. But it's not unheard of, right? Emily's usually soft voice became firm. Her hands, clasped on her skirt, trembled with tension. There are cases where it's requested. Both Emily and Jessica looked at me. It seemed the final decision was up to me. Just as I was about to shake my head, Emily's small hand wrapped around mine. Her warmth spread through me. Let me think about it, I said, signaling the end of today's meeting. I was adopted by the Reed family 19 years ago, the summer I turned 8. That January, I had lost my parents in a car accident. At that age, I didn't fully understand what it meant to lose them. I missed the moment to feel sad about their sudden departure. I understood the meaning. But I couldn't grasp the sadness or the pain. It was about a week after I started living with my paternal uncle, who was the first to take me in. I was given a room there. On the first night I slept alone, I finally cried. I thought I had muffled my sobs with the blanket, but being only 8, I wasn't very successful. I remember the warmth of my uncle's hand patting my back as he came into the room, alerted by my crying. Even if the hole left by my parents couldn't be filled, I decided to live on in that house. I never imagined my uncle had different plans. After the 49-day mourning period, he called me to his room, holding a plaque with my parents' names, Michael Smith and Grace Smith. And he bowed deeply to me, touching his hands and forehead to the tatami, saying, Hugo, I'm so sorry. He performed a formal apology, the kind that showed deep remorse. After that, I was passed from one relative's house to another. In 3 months, I stayed with 5 different relatives, paternal uncle, aunt, grandparents, maternal uncle, and grandparents. They all said they couldn't handle the sorrow I carried. Not understanding their words, I felt lost. Then a woman from the child welfare office came and presented me with 2 options. I could go to a children's home or be adopted by the Reed family, who had expressed interest in taking me in. Honestly, I was scared. Scared of hoping and then being rejected again. I was about to choose the children's home when my paternal uncle, who had been listening by my side, patted my back. Let's meet the Reeds first, he said. My uncle had always been on my side. Even when I was being scolded by my parents as a child, he would pat my head and say, that's enough, giving me a warm smile like winter sunlight. Even on the night he first rejected me, he had cried and apologized repeatedly. My uncle was a kind person. He must have deeply regretted not being able to take me in. Understanding his feelings, I agreed to visit the Reeds. After that, everything happened quickly. The Reeds, my current parents, had no issues with income or home environment. Strangely, I didn't feel any walls between us. I first met them in the spring. After several meetings, by the end of summer, I decided to become their adopted son. In the car on the way back, I could hear Emily sniffle as she listened to my story. The Reeds wanted me because they couldn't have children. But now, they have Lily. Since she was born 12 years ago, I haven't felt I belonged in that house. When I leave, I plan to cut ties with them. I bet they'd rather not attend the wedding. So I don't want to cause any unnecessary trouble. Emily, sniffling one last time, pouted and said, "I don't believe your parents think that way." I knew that. The Reeds had treated me the same as Lily. They scolded me when I did something wrong, celebrated my efforts, whether successful or not. Every morning, they greeted me with warm smiles, and at night, they comforted me with a calmness like the winter night sky. But I've always been scared. The uncertain relationship where I never knew when they might disappear again, or when they might bow and apologize. In the now quiet car, I glanced at Emily's expression. She had her finger on her chin, thinking about something again. "Mom, here," I said. On a Sunday, just a week before the move. I came downstairs to the living room, holding a framed picture. In the well-lit living room, there's no need to turn on the lights on sunny days. Bathed in sunlight, my mom was hunched over at the table. "What are you looking at?" "You'll hurt your eyes if you get too close," I said. Peering over her shoulder, I saw several albums spread out in front of her. "These are old albums. The photos have faded, so I have to squint to see them," she replied. "Yeah, they're really faded. Maybe it's more about how they were stored than their age." "Did you keep them in a sunny place?" I sat down next to her and looked at the photos. In the pictures, there was a young woman who must have been my mom, with a baby between her. Next to them, a woman who looked a lot like my mom was smiling from a hospital bed. "This is you, right, Mom?" "Yes, that's me." "The one in bed is my sister," she said. "And the baby you're holding is her child?" Mom nodded slowly but shallowly. She smiled, but frowning at the same time. She rubbed the wrinkles on her forehead with her wrinkled fingers. It wasn't just nostalgia, she looked sad, almost regretful. "Yes, that's my sister's child." "So, he would be your cousin," she said. "Then he's Lily's cousin too." "I've never heard about him before." "There was no need to talk about it," she replied. Contrary to her cold words, her voice was warmer and more emotional than usual. I closed my mouth, stopping myself from asking why. Her unchanged expression since earlier kept me silent. Sounds from outside drifted into the living room. It's a Sunday afternoon, so there were children's playful voices, cars passing by, and household noises from nearby houses. All these sounds helped fill the silence between me and my mom. "She seems like a kind person," I said, forcing the words out. Mom's eyes widened. "Your sister, she seems kind and warm." "I wish I could have met her," I said. Mom replied in a trembling voice, "Yes, I wish I could see her too," and closed the album. Even without her saying it explicitly, I understood. Mom would never be able to see her sister or this nephew again. Being told she couldn't have children and then losing contact with her nephew must have been devastating. It wasn't surprising that 19 years ago, my mom wished for adoption. If she could have still seen her nephew, she might not have needed me. I silently bowed my head to my mom's nephew in the album, whose name I didn't even know. I sent Mom a message, "Sorry for the sudden notice. I might be late, so please leave dinner out for me," and put my phone back in my pocket. I looked back at Emily, who was watching me. "I got it," I said. At noon, I had sent Emily a message about the album I saw with Mom yesterday. Emily had quickly replied, "Get your family register and meet me at our usual cafe after work," but she didn't reply to any of my subsequent messages. She only marked them as read after work. I rushed to the government office before it closed and managed to get a copy of my family register. I couldn't read Emily's true intentions or purpose. Emily, my classmate since high school, understood my loneliness and anxiety, as well as my parents' feelings. And she always supported and guided me. She never delved deeply into my background. She quietly absorbed the bits of information I gradually shared. This was the first time Emily touched upon my origins. I thought she might be anxious about my circumstances. But as soon as I entered the cafe, I realized I was wrong. Emily was already seated, waiting for me with her usual calm expression. She pushed her cup of cafe latte aside. I slid the family register I had just obtained across the table. "Did you look at it, Hugo?" she asked in her clear voice. I shook my head. My family register is complicated and detailed. There's no point in me checking it now. Why did you want to see it, Emily? I was just curious about your mother's reaction. My mom's reaction? Let's just take a look, Emily insisted. At her urging, we both lowered our gaze to the document. Of course, it started with my name. No way. This can't be. While my trembling hand covered my lips, Emily exhaled deeply, seemingly reassured and convinced of her thoughts. Maybe this person is the sister your mom was talking about. Emily's slender finger pointed to the section with my biological parents' names. Under mother in the persons recorded in the family register section. It read Lisa Reed. So, the Smiths adopted you first. Emily continued, moving her finger down. In the adoptive parents section, it listed Michael Smith and Grace Smith. The names of the parents I thought were my biological ones. You were adopted by the Smiths before you even turned 1, Emily said. Nobody ever told me. They probably intended to tell you when you were older, but never got the chance. I recalled the words of the Smith relatives. They said they couldn't empathize with my sorrow. My uncle, my grandparents, they all said the same thing. It wasn't just the grief of losing my parents. Maybe they meant they couldn't bear the sorrow I would feel upon learning this truth. I had to be told that those two were not my real parents. Was my uncle trying to say that he couldn't bear the responsibility and burden of doing so? Just as my head felt like it might explode from confusion, Emily placed her hand over mine. I'm going to turn the page, she said quietly. The next entry was the dissolution of my adoption with the Smiths. I remember hearing about this when I was going to the Reeds. They said it was for a special adoption. But it wasn't exactly that. Below the record of the dissolution with the Smiths, there was another adoption record. It listed David Reed and Alice Reed, my current parents. Let me process this for a moment, I said, taking a gulp of coffee to moisten my dry mouth. Emily had been waiting for me for quite a while. The other customers had completely changed during that time. Emily had even refilled her cafe latte twice. Okay, I said. With my single word, Emily lifted her head. I am the child of Lisa Reed, my mother's sister, and I was adopted by the Smith family soon after I was born. For some reason, I was supposed to grow up with them. But after losing the Smith parents and having nowhere to go, Mom, the Reed family took me in. Emily, who had been nodding repeatedly as she listened to my story, finally spoke. They told you it was a special adoption because you believed the Smiths were your real parents. They had to explain the separation. So they called it a special adoption. But actually, you were a regular adoptee with the Smiths, and it was just a regular dissolution. I nodded slightly in agreement with Emily's understanding. Emily's third cup of cafe latte was also empty. My iced coffee glass was left with only ice. I understand, but it's hard to accept, I said, looking down. Suddenly, a white handkerchief slid into my view. Hugo, you liar. Emily's voice was soft. When I looked up, I knew Emily would be smiling gently. I cried like a child. I felt as if my tears would soak the handkerchief she handed me. The first thing that came to mind was the faces of the Smith parents. My memories were hazy, but until today, I had never doubted that they were my real parents. On the days they scolded me, the days they rejoiced because of me, they held me in their arms. After starting elementary school, I once got into a fight with a classmate. It was a trivial matter and didn't become a big deal. But my parents listened to my vent for a long time. Usually, I had to be in bed by 9, but that day, they stayed up past midnight, nodding at my words until I started to doze off. They never denied my thoughts, nor did they reject the others. In the end, my father said, it's a miracle to fully understand everyone. But even with those you can't fully understand, you can still shake hands. Knowing this now will make you a strong and kind person, Hugo, and he hugged me again. My uncle and grandparents, even though they couldn't live with me, loved me dearly. They always visited me on my birthday and Christmas. After I went to the Reed family, I must have been quite unstable. I tried to be a good kid, focusing only on getting good grades at school. But my new father invited me to play catch. I remember my new mom sitting on a bench with a lunchbox. At first, the catch was silent, but as the sun set and my arm started to ache. It happened. My father suddenly called my name, Hugo, and threw the ball. "What?" I said as I threw the ball back. He caught the ball, paused for a moment, and then looked up at me. "Hugo, thank you for being in this world," he said. And his throw landed perfectly in my glove. "Thank you. I'm happy to be your father." "I'm the happiest man in the world," he said multiple times. Why did I forget that? Even after Lily was born, my father always looked at me with the same eyes as on that day. Why did I keep doubting their love? As my tears dried up, I noticed Emily had moved to the seat next to me. "Hugo, go and ask," she said. Not understanding her intention, I looked at Emily with my probably red eyes. "Don't you want to ask why you went to the Smiths in the first place? Let's leave after you get your answers." Emily squeezed my hand. We looked at each other for a while. Then, I nodded slightly. "Hugo, is this all your stuff?" Lily, in her jersey, pointed to the last cardboard box left in the room. 6 days had passed since I learned about my birth. Today, I am leaving home. In the end, I couldn't ask my parents anything. It's sad that you won't be able to play with your cute little sister anymore once you leave. I prioritized spending time with Lily, who kept saying things like that. But it's no even an excuse. You didn't tell me it would be this hard. I wasted my whole day off. "I should get paid for this," Lily complained, pouting. "You said you wanted to experience moving, didn't you?" I replied, handing her a sports drink. Even after gulping down half the bottle with a satisfying sound like in a commercial, Lily's face didn't brighten up. "Fine, what do you want?" "Just so you know, no money. School rules prohibit part-time jobs," I said. Lily laughed. "You're so serious, Hugo," then gave me a mature look I had never seen before. "Talk to Mom properly," she said. Lily took another sip of her drink. "What should I talk about?" I asked, my voice tense. I didn't know how much Lily knew. I couldn't say anything reckless. "I don't know, but Mom hasn't been herself. And ever since you decided to leave, you've been acting strange too. Dinner used to be fun with the four of us, but now it's not," Lily said, covering her face with the towel draped over her shoulder. And, despite her trembling voice, she kept telling me, "Talk to Mom. I love Mom, Dad, and you, Hugo. I don't want you to leave with things being bad between us," she said. Her weak fists hit my arm repeatedly. Again and again, she expressed her feelings. "I'm sorry, I'm a terrible brother," I said. Lily had grown up. 12 years ago, she could fit in my arms, but now she reached up to my chest. Her hands, her back, and her heart. While I stood still, Lily had been growing. I felt a sting in my nose. I was happy and sad about her growth. "Thank you," I said. When Lily lifted her head, she smiled cheekily. "You better be really grateful." In the now empty room, I faced my mom alone. Lily had gone out with Dad to buy lunch. She was being considerate in her own way. "Sitting on your knees like that on the floor, doesn't it hurt?" Mom's smile had a shadow. She had the same expression as when she was looking at the album that day. I took the folded family register out of my pocket. I unfolded it and placed it on the floor between us. "Yes, I thought it was about time you found out," Mom said without any surprise or lament. She took a deep breath and began to speak, as if resigning herself. "Hugo, as it's written there, you are my nephew." Seeing me nod firmly, she nodded once as well. It felt like we were confirming our feelings, like a mutual understanding. Even after knowing and speaking the truth, nothing would change. It was a moment of confirming our resolve and trust in each other. "Your real mother, my sister Lisa Reed, died shortly after giving birth to you. She was always frail. When we learned she was pregnant with you at 18, the whole family opposed the idea." "Even you, Mom?" I asked. "When I was 13 at the time, I loved my sister very much, but that's no even an excuse. I wasn't shocked by what I heard. If I had heard this when I was 15, holding Lily for the first time, I might have sunk into deep sadness. Mom moved a bit closer to me and continued speaking, but, she said, my sister, who wanted to have a child with the person she loved, disappeared almost like a runaway, but she sent me a letter. When I rushed to the hospital and saw you just born, I felt foolish for opposing her. I thought so from the bottom of my heart. Mom's voice and hands began to tremble. My sister only told me that the man who was your father was no longer around at that time. So, I don't know anything about your father. I'm sorry. If I found out, I'd be angry, I said jokingly. Mom shrugged and replied, if only anger was all it would take. When my sister passed away, I was just a child and couldn't do anything. I felt countless times how powerless I was, seeing you in the Smiths' arms. So, when I became an adult, I got a job and married, ready to welcome you anytime. Of course. It was best if you could stay happy with the family who adopted you. The Smith family loved me, I said. Yes, I felt that as soon as I saw you with them. That's why both your dad and I grew to love you even more, Mom said. Not fully understanding her words, I tilted my head. Seeing my confusion, Mom gave me a gentle smile. At first, I wanted to protect you because my sister cherished you more than her own life. It felt like a duty. Or maybe my love for my sister was stronger. But after reuniting with you and seeing you surrounded by so much love, I wanted you to feel that you belong with us. I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. Your dad said that you had been loved by so many but still felt insecure. What you needed was a place where you belong. Mom said as she wiped my tears. Congratulations on your wedding, she said, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Thank you for everything, I said, curling up and holding the family register close to my chest. Thinking of all the people who had supported and loved me. My hair felt heavy with wax and spray. Formal attire felt incredibly restrictive, and I lost count of how many deep breaths I had taken today. Next to me, Emily, dressed in an orange gown, gave me a thumbs up. Now, a letter from the groom to his family. The female MC announced solemnly to the venue. I stood up slowly and walked to the stand microphone. After clearing my throat, I faced forward. I turned towards the table where Dad, Mom, and Lily were seated. It might be unusual to hear a groom's letter, but I have people I must express my gratitude to. May I have your time and attention? I asked. The audience responded with applause. I took an envelope from my inner pocket. I pulled out a single sheet of stationery from the envelope. On that single sheet, I had written the names Lisa Reed, Michael Smith, Grace Smith, David Reed, and Alice Reed. I have 3 mothers and 2 fathers, I said. The audience murmured briefly but then quieted down. Emily's parents nodded with calm expressions. I was glad I had told them on the day we registered our marriage. Lily wasn't surprised or crying. She watched with a serious expression, waiting for the rest of my letter. When people hear just this part, they often say, it must have been tough, or you went through a lot. But I never found it tough or difficult. There were some lonely nights, but looking back, I feel I spent every day in a warm and loving home, I continued. I held up the sheet of stationery. There were gasps from the audience. The stationery only had the names of my 5 parents. I had told Emily that I wanted to speak from my heart rather than read a prepared speech. She had agreed without hesitation, saying, "That's so like you, Hugo," with a smile. "I am here today because of the love of everyone. I am the happiest person in the world. Please let me express my heartfelt gratitude to my 5 parents who brought me into this world and raised me." I walked over to the Reed family's table. I made eye contact with Dad, Mom, and Lily in turn. Thank you for being my family. Thank you for all you've done, and I look forward to our future together. Applause erupted from the audience. Amid the unending cheers, Dad and Mom hugged me. I looked up to the heavens and, with a clear voice, said, "Thank you," to my other 3 parents as well. Hey, is it ready yet? How much longer do you expect us to wait? Angry voices from the audience echoed throughout the venue. At a seminar event hosted by our company, we were facing our worst crisis, as no one could communicate in Japanese or English. Marie, the CEO's daughter and the event organizer, could only pale in silence at the incomprehensible language barrier. As the tension grew, I took hold of the microphone, and the entire atmosphere shifted. Who exactly are you? I awoke in an uncomfortable airplane seat and glanced out the window to see a dense cluster of buildings below. The structures that had appeared small and flat were gradually taking shape, and enormous buildings began to emerge. The neon lights of a bustling city resist dawn, with Tokyo Tower in the background. As the dawn began to color the scene, I looked down at the flower-shaped origami in my hand and murmured, "I'm home." I'm Alex, 28 years old. I had returned to Japan. 15 years ago, my parents passed away in a car accident. It was a pileup on the freeway. The car my dad was driving was rear-ended and collided with a tanker truck in front of us. The front of the car was damaged beyond recognition. The news that day prominently featured the crash, using the crumpled driver's and passenger's seats to illustrate the impact. My dad and mom, who were sitting up front, didn't survive, but I, then 13 years old, managed to survive in the back seat. We were on our way to visit my sister, who was hospitalized in a large hospital in the city. My sister Lily, 2 years younger than me, was born with a heart condition and had been in and out of the hospital numerous times. That day, I remember Dr. Thompson saying Lily was doing better and would probably be discharged temporarily the following week. While our parents spoke with Dr. Thompson, Lily and I played with origami. On the drive home, the mood was bright, and we talked about celebrating her discharge with cake and what kind of food to prepare. It all happened in an instant. In the aftermath, I was left holding the morning glory flower Lily had folded that day. With both my dad's parents already gone, it was decided that my maternal grandmother would take in me and my sister. But caring for a middle schooler and a sister in and out of the hospital proved overwhelming for her, as she lived alone. In the meantime, I apparently retreated into myself, traumatized by the accident. My memories from that period are hazy. It was Kevin, my uncle, Mom's younger brother, who reached out to me. Uncle Kevin, who traveled frequently for work, was always busy, and I barely knew him. Still, my mother had often spoken of him as a close friend and a brother she was proud of. "Alex, how about coming with me to see the world?" He looked at me standing before my parents' graves, and his expression was resolute. For a man who enjoyed his single life, taking on the responsibility of raising a middle schooler must have been a huge commitment. After that, we truly traveled all over, to country after country. In some places, we stayed a year, while in others, less than 3 months. Uncle Kevin never let me lack for anything financially, but he preferred to leave me to my own devices, not offering much guidance. At first, the emotional shock and the sudden change overwhelmed me, but gradually, I started reaching out to the world around me. Lily remained with my grandmother in Japan, continuing her cycle of hospital visits. First, she lost our parents, and then her brother left for overseas. The loss must have been intense for an 11-year-old. When I returned to Japan once a year, Lily would cling to me with joy. No matter how much time passed, she was like the little girl she was at 11, and on the day I'd leave, she'd cry, trying to suppress her sobs with a flushed face. I would always promise her, wiping away her falling tears, "Once I can work, I'll definitely come back for you, Lily." In return, she would hand me an origami flower, as if placing all her hopes into that little paper charm. I'm going to work in Japan and live with Lily. I thought of it as both my dream and my mission. Considering Lily's health, I needed a stable income and a solid foundation for our life together. Following Uncle Kevin's advice to finish my education, I enrolled in an American university and graduated in 4 years. My job search naturally centered on Japan-based companies. Now finally, Lily and I could live together. When I called to tell her the news, her voice was the happiest I'd ever heard. But just as everything seemed to be coming together, a new virus swept across the world, making it nearly impossible to leave America. Days went by in helpless frustration, until the worst happened. Lily is. My grandmother's faint voice over the phone felt distant and surreal. Lily, who had been told it would be a miracle to live until 20, had reached her limit. Her heart simply couldn't go on any longer. I couldn't even attend the funeral, so I wasn't able to say goodbye to the only family I had left. After canceling my job offer in Japan, I ended up staying in America, working here, and even when travel restrictions were lifted, I couldn't bring myself to return to Japan. I still can't accept a world without Lily in it. Then this year, I was assigned to the Japan office, and after 7 long years, I finally returned to Japan. Welcome home, Alex. After finishing some paperwork for my new place, I headed to my grandmother's house in the evening. She seemed smaller than I remembered, more fragile. You'll stay for dinner, right? Ah, but first, you should say hello to everyone, she said, trying to fuss over me as she always did. Her gaze drifted toward the back room. Inside was the family altar, with photos of my parents and a smiling young girl. For a moment, the world seemed to spin. Who is this? The pounding in my ears felt overwhelming. Unable to bear the sudden tightness in my chest, I muttered an excuse and hurried out of the house. Walking through the crowded streets, I struggled to steady my racing heart as night fell completely. The lights in Tokyo were so bright, and the crowd so dense, that it made me wonder how people managed to live in such a packed city. In this sea of faces, it felt like Lily could be somewhere here, too. It was a comforting thought. The sticky June air reminded me of the seasons back home. With a hard seltzer I'd picked up at a convenience store in hand, I wandered aimlessly through the streets. Only in Japan could I get away with something like this. I stopped, finally able to breathe again, and found myself near a narrow alley in the nightlife district. Then, I heard a voice shout, "Let go of me." I looked over and saw a woman being hassled by a man. With a smug grin, the man held tightly to the woman's arm as she raised her voice, trying to break free. Yet, people around only stole glances, avoiding involvement. This wasn't exactly a safe area, so maybe scenes like this were just everyday occurrences here. While I was debating whether to intervene, the man walked past me, leading the woman further down the alley. Then a familiar scent caught my attention, stopping me cold. I knew this scent. Lily. I dashed into the alley where the man and the woman had disappeared. The man, startled by my sudden appearance, went pale as I grabbed him by the collar, my voice full of rage. I yelled at the man like a madman, my eyes surely wild and bloodshot. Pathetically, he turned and ran off without much of a fight. I turned immediately and embraced Lily tightly. "I'm so sorry I was late, Lily. I'm so sorry." The smell of antiseptic and that familiar hospital scent clung to her. "Yeah, it's Lily. You're really alive." I held her even tighter, tears of joy welling up. As I held her tighter, Lily stiffened in my arms and suddenly began struggling. "Let go of me." The moment I loosened my grip, a shock exploded across my cheek. "Get away, you creep." The sting of her slap registered just as I realized the voice was unfamiliar. Who is this woman? Before me stood a stranger. She seemed about Lily's age, but she looked nothing like her. Her eyes were filled with confusion, anger, and fear as she glared at me. "I'm sorry, I mistook you for my sister. Of course, Lily couldn't be here." I knew that. I knew. Your sister? I don't get it. Are you insane? The woman's face twisted with disgust as she turned and stormed off. I can smell that again in the lingering scent of the woman walking away. It stuck stubbornly in my nose because of the humid air. Really, what's wrong with me? Maybe my senses were dulled by that ridiculously strong drink I'd bought earlier. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to move. The following Monday was my first day at the Japan branch's office. My role was to promote our company's medical products at events and seminars. I was assigned here for 1 to 2 years to help expand our market share in Japan and globally. Alex, I'd like you to assist with our upcoming seminar and event preparations. This is the project lead, Marie. As Luke, my supervisor, introduced me to Marie, we both froze, staring at each other. Luke left after a brief talk, and an odd tension lingered between us. I'm really sorry about the other day, I said first, breaking the silence. I know it was a case of mistaken identity. But I made you feel unsafe, and I deeply regret that. I was the first to speak. Bowing my head in apology to Marie, the woman I had mistaken for Lily, and hugged. Never did I imagine the weirdo from the other night would turn out to be a transfer from our headquarters. Should I be calling the police? I'm truly sorry. I know this sounds like an excuse, but I just arrived in Japan, was jet-lagged, and admittedly had a bit to drink that night. Even as I said it, I knew how poor an excuse it was. Marie let out a quiet sigh. You can stop apologizing. I could definitely smell the alcohol on you that night. Being drunk isn't an excuse, but whatever your intentions. I did end up being helped out of a bad situation. So I won't be saying anything about it. You are a competent helper from the headquarters. If you perform well on the job, I really don't care about your character. But just keep your distance. She made it clear she didn't trust me, but she truly never brought up the incident again. With her steady eyes, impeccable makeup, and wavy hair, Marie seemed every bit the competent professional and looked nothing like Lily. From that awful first meeting on, I never again caught that strange scent of antiseptic around her. After a few days, I learned from co-workers that she was our branch manager Tom's daughter. Our company wasn't the type to hand out jobs to family members, though. Marie had joined as a regular new hire, passing all the interviews and even facing her father in the final round. Apparently, Tom hadn't known his daughter was interviewing until she stood in front of him. Marie's track record was impressive, and at just 26, she'd already managed several projects. Knowing a woman Lily's age was thriving like this made me proud for her, but it also made my heart ache for my sister, who never had that chance. I found myself seeking connections between Marie and Lily, but I forced the thought out of my head and focused on my work. After about 2 months at the branch, Marie's initial wariness toward me seemed to ease. Today, we had a meeting with the representatives from a partner company for an upcoming seminar. This was my first time meeting the partner team. When I asked Marie about the contact person, she replied, "Don't expect any useful input from them for this event. Let's just get through it and wrap up quickly." Her tone was almost dismissive. I'm surprised at her unexpected remark. Though we'd only worked together for a couple of months, Marie didn't strike me as someone who looked down on others. Puzzled, I walked into the meeting room, and the contact from the partner company greeted me. The moment he spoke, I suddenly understood Marie's tone. And everything made sense. "Alex? Is that really you, Alex?" This was the first thing he said in response to my greeting. Working in America, I find business etiquette and language are generally more relaxed than in Japan, which initially threw me off when using Japanese business formalities. Well, to be honest, it still does. Even so, I couldn't help but frown when he leaned in close and blurted out his greeting like that. "Have we met somewhere before?" I asked politely, suppressing a frown, but he just looked at me like I was crazy for not recognizing him. "It's me, Brandon from middle school. You remember, right? We were in the same class in 7th grade. And I was the one who stayed friends with you until you dropped out." His smug grin jogged my memory just enough to finally recognize him. "Oh, right, Brandon. It's been a while. I never expected to see you here at work. I only have vague memories of middle school, honestly. I got into an accident before the summer break of my first year, then left Japan with my uncle that winter. My time in Japanese middle school was so short that I didn't have any close friends. After I got out of the hospital and went back to school, most people treated me like I was fragile, while a few others seemed almost eager to ask questions about the accident. Brandon was one of those guys. You basically stopped showing up and left without saying goodbye. We thought you might have, well, been so upset after your parents passed that you couldn't handle it." The way he smirked as he spoke suggested it had always been a joke to him. "But I never thought you'd end up working at that company. Are you just a temp or something? I mean, you were a middle school dropout, right? So, what's your highest education, elementary school?" Wow, this is a first. I was so baffled by Brandon's smug ignorance that I was momentarily speechless. "Anyway, let me take charge here and make sure you don't drag Marie down. Marie, leave him to me." He suddenly turned to Marie, putting on a showy, needless display of bravado. His intentions were painfully obvious, and his lack of professionalism was beyond annoying. When I opened my mouth, ready to move things along, "If I may," Marie cut in, her voice calm but firm, "our company only hires college graduates. Alex is an employee of our American headquarters. And technically, I'm the one who should be learning from him. I'm sure there's much you could learn from Alex as well. While we do hire only college graduates, I personally don't think academic background defines a person. After all, having a degree doesn't necessarily mean one has integrity." Marie didn't even look at Brandon as she spoke. Before he could stammer a response, I nudged us back on track, noting that we were pressed for time. Marie politely said, "Apologies," and smoothly transitioned us back to the business at hand. Throughout the rest of the meeting, his colleague, Logan, was the one apologizing on Brandon's behalf, while Brandon sat in silent irritation, failing to hide his annoyance. After the meeting, when it was just Marie and me, I spoke up. "Marie, thank you for earlier. You didn't need to get involved, though. Won't it make things harder between the companies? I feel bad since I'm the one who ended up complicating things. Technically, this was a joint event, but Marie was the one in charge. Getting into conflicts with a key partner must be a hassle for her." "No, please, it wasn't your fault at all, Alex. He's been like that for a while, and I've just had enough." Marie smiled slightly, almost sheepishly, with a hint of humor. "Maybe I wasn't very mature about it," she added, shrugging playfully. The lightheartedness made me chuckle. "Your last line had a real punch to it. I really can't stand people who judge others without knowing them or who put people down just to feel superior." It was a characteristic, straightforward opinion from her. Although, she continued, "When I was a kid, I made snap judgments about people too, especially with everything people would say about my dad. I guess it made me a bit rebellious. But someone told me that wasn't the way to be. They said it to me and to the kids who looked down on me. Don't judge someone by just one part of them. Sounds like a wonderful person. Yes, they really were, she replied softly, lowering her gaze, a trace of sadness crossing her features. After that, daily tasks and event preparations continued smoothly, and Brandon didn't say a word. Actually, it would be more accurate to say he didn't do much of anything at all. He only completed the bare minimum of what was assigned to him. As Marie had pointed out, it seemed unlikely we'd get any useful input from him. It was the day of the seminar. The main audience today was foreign medical professionals interested in working in Japanese healthcare. Japan's healthcare system has an excellent global reputation, and many overseas aspire to work as nurses here. We had registrants from various countries, especially from Asia. 1 hour before the event. Even though Brandon was supposed to have started preparations 2 hours ago, he was nowhere in sight. Some essential materials and equipment were his responsibility. He was in charge of preparing translated documents in multiple languages and recording the seminar in audio for translation playback. This seminar was advertised as open to participants even if they were not fluent in Japanese. In fact, given how challenging medical terminology can be, even for those proficient in English, we highlighted that we'd prepared translation devices tailored to each participant's language. Without these devices, we'd certainly be dealing with complaints from the attendees who registered. I had been calling Brandon repeatedly since earlier, but there was still no answer. His assistant, Logan, had informed us he wouldn't be able to join today due to another event. So Brandon was the only one scheduled to handle our preparations. Since it's a Sunday and the office is closed, contacting Brandon's company is also out of the question. We were hitting dead ends at every turn. With only 30 minutes left, the room was starting to fill with registered participants. The venue was gradually filling up with attendees. 50 people had registered for the day. Though it wasn't a large crowd, this seminar held a vital purpose: collecting data that would aid in the development of electronic medical records in the future. To ensure we could host similar seminars regularly, this one needed to be a success. The time was almost upon us. Seeing Marie's anxious expression, I suggested she start with an introductory greeting and buy us some time while I stepped out to search for solutions. When I returned a few minutes later, I found the situation had already escalated, with participants openly voicing complaints. "Hey, are we starting or not? How much longer are you going to keep us waiting?" Despite her nerves, Marie was delivering her speech in English, handling the situation admirably. "I'm so sorry. Please just give us a little more time," she said apologetically. However, many of the participants were non-English speakers. Noticing Marie's struggle to respond to those approaching her in other languages, I stepped forward and began addressing the audience. "My apologies for the delay. We'll be ready shortly, so in the meantime, I'll be happy to take any questions." I made this announcement in English and other languages I could manage. Standing beside me, Marie looked stunned as I spoke in multiple languages, addressing each question and persuading the crowd to give us a bit more time. As we stepped aside, Marie turned to me and said, "Alex, that was amazing. How many languages do you speak?" she asked, her tone a bit excited. "Well, I've lived in a few different countries, so including Japanese and English, maybe 6, at least at a conversational level. Definitely not business level, though. Anyway, we still haven't been able to reach Brandon, so what's our next step?" Basic conversation was fine, but when it came to medical topics, we still needed Brandon's translation device. Marie sighed, taking out her phone. But something slipped out of her pocket. Marie, you dropped something, is that origami? The item I picked up was a laminated origami flower. Slightly worn around the edges, showing its age. Oh, sorry about that. It's a good luck charm, she replied. It was the flower-shaped origami charm. I couldn't take my eyes off it, and Marie, noticing, gave me a puzzled look. Is something wrong? She asked, a bit curious. Wait. I've got it, she suddenly exclaimed. I'll run to the dollar store next door and grab as much origami paper as they have. She rushed off to the neighboring building. Returning about 10 minutes later, out of breath, Marie began handing out 2 sheets of origami paper to each participant. Alex, could you translate for me as I go over the instructions? She asked. Setting up a camera to project her hands onto the monitor, she began her impromptu origami lesson. We'd like to introduce origami, a traditional Japanese art, which is also used in pediatric wards and rehabilitation settings. With that introduction, the impromptu origami lesson began. Though often thought of as a children's pastime, origami is actually used in medical and caregiving contexts in Japan. By engaging both hands and encouraging mental focus, origami offers simple yet effective rehabilitation exercises that can increase in complexity as skills progress. Including these explanations, the origami session surprisingly captured the participants' interest. As they followed the folding steps, everyone seemed genuinely focused and even enjoying themselves. Midway through, Logan from the partner company arrived with the translation device, allowing us to proceed with the seminar as planned. The seminar finished about 30 minutes behind schedule. On the way out, I felt relieved seeing a female participant smiling as she held up a slightly crooked origami crane with pride. After the attendees had left, the venue was empty and silent. What exactly were you thinking? Marie's clear voice, laced with restrained anger, echoed through the quiet space. Brandon and Logan had arrived midway through the origami session because I'd called Logan myself. Clearly not expecting me to have Logan's contact information, Brandon, his face twisted in frustration, directed his irritation toward Marie. Why did you overrun the rental time by 30 minutes? It's really inconvenient, you know? At a joint seminar like this, extending the time without consulting anyone is just, well, you all are the event leads, so you'll be covering the extra costs, right? But overall, it wasn't a bad session, right? Any real issues? Brandon, what are you talking about? Logan looked baffled by Brandon's nonsensical response. Do you realize that the chaos today was entirely your doing? Or rather, that you intentionally showed up late to sabotage the event? Do you even have any pride in your work? Marie raised her voice, openly revealing her anger. Was I really late? Who here can prove that? Don't accuse me baselessly, all right? Logan, you saw me here from the start, right? He placed a heavy hand on Logan's shoulder, clearly trying to intimidate him. Logan probably felt he couldn't stand up to Brandon. Seeing Brandon's immature and bullying behavior, my sense of disgust only deepened. Can you still say that after we review the footage from the company car? Marie's face shifted from anger to an eerily calm expression. Brandon looked confused, so I added. The company car you used today belongs to us. All our company vehicles are equipped with dashcams. Since Brandon was responsible for bringing the equipment, he'd been provided with one of our company's cars. Realizing the implications, Brandon's face went pale. The GPS data, timestamps, and in-car audio and video could easily confirm his lateness, and it would all be reported to his company. I'll be reporting this incident to your company, including the repeated, unnecessary contacts you've made to me personally. Don't ever contact me again. With an expression as cold as ice, Marie left Brandon speechless. Now ghostly pale, it was clear he wouldn't be working with us again. Cheers! Cheers! With the turbulent yet successful seminar behind us, Marie and I decided to celebrate over drinks. Now that I thought about it, this was our first time going out for a drink together. Even though it was September, the air was still thick with humidity, making the night feel warmer than the temperature suggested. The crisp, cold beer helped clear away the muggy feeling. Why didn't you report Brandon's messages to the company sooner, Marie? I wanted to wait until this seminar was over. I was hoping to handle it more diplomatically, but today, I just hit my limit. I'm planning to make sure he never works with us again. She spoke casually as she snacked on some pickles, seemingly unfazed, likely accustomed to receiving unwanted attention. At a glance, she's a striking, beautiful woman. It's no surprise that plenty of men would try to pursue her. Well, I'm glad nothing serious happened. But if anyone ever bothers you like that again, don't hesitate to report it. It's too late once something happens. Marie chuckled. You're surprisingly protective, Alex. Like a dad or maybe more like a big brother? Her laughter made me feel a bit self-conscious, like I'd been overdramatic. I had a younger sister. Maybe that's why I get worried around women about her age. Oh, you had a sister. I think you mentioned that the first time we met? Was that for real? She remembered our first meeting, and her question brought me back to that day, making me feel a little sheepish. It probably sounded strange, and I'm sorry if it did. But yeah, it was true. I had a younger sister who was the same age as you. 2 years younger than me. You had, what about now? She passed away. I'm so sorry. Marie murmured, a quiet apology, almost instinctive. Anyway, your idea for the impromptu origami lesson was brilliant. It really added a unique touch to the event. And I think it'd be great to incorporate it into future seminars, especially for international audiences. If we could get some occupational therapists or specialists involved, it could become a really engaging activity. I shifted the conversation, trying to lighten the mood. Speaking aloud about Lily being gone had left me feeling slightly shaken. That idea just came to me when I saw my origami charm, Marie said. It really felt like it came to my rescue. She took the charm out of her pocket and looked at it, smiling faintly with a touch of sadness. Remember how I mentioned that someone once told me it's a shame to judge people based on just one part of them? That person. That girl was the one who made this for me. It seems that Marie had a serious illness when she was a child, leading to a long period of hospitalization. After countless surgeries and an extended hospital stay, she now only has to go for regular checkups and can live a fairly normal life. During that hospital stay, she met the girl who gave her the origami charm. While Marie's condition improved, her friend's prognosis remained bleak, with no real hope for a cure. Even after Marie was discharged and started attending middle school, she continued visiting the girl in the hospital regularly. She lost her parents in an accident and was separated from her brother, so she always had this hint of sadness, but whenever I visited, she'd light up, laughing and chatting. She was incredibly sweet and got along with everyone in the ward. They said she might not make it to 20. But she held on, and just before she turned 20, she told me she was finally going to be able to live with her brother overseas. But Marie's voice faltered, her eyes misting with emotion. Lily! My quiet murmur made her look up at me in shock. Lily was my one and only sister. No, you're Lily's brother? We both stared at each other, too stunned to speak. How could it be that the friend in front of me was the one Lily had grown so close to? It felt like fate, but in the most surreal way. I didn't know, Marie said, bowing her head suddenly. I had no idea you were her brother when we first met, and I was rude to you. I didn't even thank you for helping me that day. Thank you. I hurried to reassure her, telling her it was fine and urging her to lift her head. As I looked at her, a thought resurfaced. During her long stay in the hospital, Lily had become quite skilled at origami. I remembered that now. Just wondering, but on the day we met, were you coming from the hospital? Ah, yes, actually. It was a regular checkup day, so I'd just been to the hospital. The faint smell of antiseptic I'd noticed that day hadn't been my imagination. I couldn't remember Lily's voice. Without photos, I probably wouldn't even have a clear image of her face anymore. But that hospital scent, for some reason, had embedded itself in my mind. It had become my memory of her. Lost in these thoughts, I could only mumble to myself, I see, and Marie spoke up. Lily was always saying how proud she was of you, Alex, Marie said gently. She told me that no matter where you were, you'd come back once a year with all kinds of souvenirs and stories. She'd even try to be temporarily discharged from the hospital just to be there when you arrived. I'm really not a brother to be proud of. After our parents died, I could hardly be there for her. Listening to her words only highlighted my regrets as her older brother, the things I hadn't done, the times I hadn't been there. That's not true at all. Lily herself told me. However you may feel, she saw you as her amazing, beloved big brother. She was always talking about how cool you were. Honestly, I thought she was a bit of a brother fanatic. I was a little surprised to see her face as her tone grew passionate. Our eyes met, and she added with a soft smile as if on the verge of tears, but she was right. You really are a wonderful person, Alex. For a moment, I wondered what expression I wore. Her eyes glistened, contrasting with my own dry gaze. The next week, I went about my work as usual. With the seminar over, my assignments with Marie also wrapped up, and we didn't have much reason to interact. On Friday night, I got a message from Marie, with whom I hardly had any conversations this week. Would you like to visit the cemetery with me this weekend? I'd been thinking about this all week. I hadn't truly let Lily go. Maybe it was time to find some closure. Agreeing to her invitation, I left my house on Saturday morning. An hour and a half by train from the city, the area wasn't fully rural but not quite urban either. It's been a long time since I'd been back to my old hometown. Lily rests beside my parents in the family cemetery. It was another 30-minute taxi ride from the station to the cemetery, a large, well-kept green space with clean, organized plots. Every time I'd returned to Japan, I'd visited my parents' grave, but it had been 7 years since my last visit here. I realized what an ungrateful son I'd been. I arrived in front of the grave. For some reason, my feet refused to move any further. The thought that Lily is here. The moment I acknowledged that, my vision wavered. At that moment, a gentle hand rested on my back, soothingly rubbing as if to comfort me. It was Marie. We hadn't exchanged many words on the way here, but I was grateful for the quiet. Taking a deep breath, I finally took the steps to stand directly before the grave. I placed the flowers and put my hands together in prayer. Dad, Mom, I'm home. I greeted my parents. But I couldn't bring myself to speak to Lily. Looking again at the headstone, I saw, along with my parents' names, another name engraved. The stark reality hit me: Lily is truly here. Alex, Marie said softly, I've been holding on to something your grandmother gave me as a keepsake, but I think you should have it. I was just staring at the grave, and what she handed me was a phone. An old model that had belonged to Lily for many years. It was charged, so it could be activated. I saw the photos she had taken. Some included Marie, and Lily was smiling brightly with friends her own age, something I'd never seen before. I couldn't help but smile. It struck me then, I had no photos with Lily. I'd always avoided cameras, and now I regretted never capturing those moments together. In a folder titled Big Brother, there were old family photos of Lily and me, likely taken from family albums, along with scenic shots I'd sent her from abroad. Then Marie spoke hesitantly. I felt a bit guilty, but please check the unsent drafts. I opened the mail app, and there was a single draft saved in the outbox. I read in silence, the words sinking deep into me. Alex, when you called to say you'd be coming back to Japan, I was so happy. I told you I was excited, but I don't think we should live together. You'd do too much for me. I don't think I'll live much longer. I don't want you to be sad. I want you to live your life freely. It sounds cool, but it's my wish. My last selfish request, please cry for me when I'm gone. Cry and remember me. But after that, live happily, laugh, and keep going. I love you, my big brother. There was more text at the bottom. Alex, I want to see you. Tears began to fall freely, spilling onto the screen. The message had been written just a week before Lily's passing. I wonder what Lily was thinking, feeling, and looking like as she typed this message. How many times had she rewritten those words? Was she crying? Smiling? Hurting? Suffering? Uncontrollable sobs escaped my lips, words failing me entirely. Here I was, a grown man, kneeling and crying like a child. But I didn't care how it looked. Lily was gone. This was the first time I truly accepted it. Ignoring the dirt, Marie knelt beside me, gently wrapping her arm around my shoulder as I cried. You finally cried. It's one of the hardest things in the world, needing to cry but not being able to. Her gentle voice and the soft beat of her heart made me feel grounded. Ah! I'm alive. That sound helped calm my tears. Lily used to say that if you and I ever got married, we could all be a family forever. I know it was just a childhood dream, but somehow, I think Lily brought us together. So, once you've cried it all out, would you try living and laughing with me? Hearing her kind words, I placed my hand on hers, resting on my shoulder. Lily, I'm home. Just then, a gentle breeze brushed over our heads. The sadness of loss may never fully heal. But when we face that sadness, perhaps we find something precious in return.